Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. So, another response to Franklin Who. I don't even really know how to respond, frankly. It's, there's a. I could argue that my trolls, my haters, have been more responsive in making counter arguments than Franklin is in this video. And there's a clear disrespect. Apparently, he can't watch any of this video content. So he's just reacting to the accusation that mv squared is wrong, and he doesn't want to pay any attention to any argument made about the history, exactly how the formula started, mv, and how it was changed in the 1800s to 1/2 mv squared, why those changes took place at the same time as the work energy formula, which of course is what's being argued here. Absolutely paid no attention to any of the arguments about the lever, about the fact that the Professor Lewin experiment, where you have 2/3 the momentum, you have an increase in the momentum in a direction, is essentially creates a perpetual motion machine. I've diagrammed the machine you could make. He addressed nothing. So I'm just going to make the lever argument after I do this paraphrase of his video. And I'll just say, please respond to an actual argument I've made. Please respond to the evidence. I want to argue evidence, and I want to argue theory. I don't want to argue mathematical jargon, and it is just that, jargon. So let's say, okay, his whole video response is on the mathematical bullshit. Let's just get that over with. I mean, I've already done it, all right? So he doesn't want to watch any of the videos. He didn't watch any of the video he actually uses in this video response. He actually didn't watch that video. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's just such a diss. So we're going to play, well, I'll play this little clip, and then I will explain the 30 minutes he spent doing mathematical derivations.
mv squared. But let me show you how I got to that. But first of all, let's look at what he's got on his board here.
So what I have on the board is the lever argument, the bowling ball argument, the Professor Lewin perpetual motion machine argument. I have arguments on the board, and you paid no attention to any of them.
Now, I'm not so sure about the whole weight thing.
So he says, I'm not so sure about the whole weight thing. It's a lever. It's you can't get a simple mechanical device. It's clear that if I put the energy in one side, I can get twice as much energy out of the other side. That's what their theory says. Their theory says in your little red Corvette, it takes 4 times more gas to go 60 miles an hour than it takes to go 30 miles an hour. Do you believe that? Do you believe it takes you 4 times more gasoline to go 60 miles an hour than 30 miles an hour? Do you believe that you'll use 4 times more gas if you drove 60 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour to a location? Do you believe that's true? If you don't believe it's true, then you have damn good reason to think there's something wrong with this formula, but the formula says so. Damn it. The formula says the 8-pound ball going 16 miles an hour knocks down twice as many pins. It has twice as much capacity to change the universe. Their theory says the bullet coming out of one side of the gun has 1,000 times more energy than the recoil of the gun, breaking Newton's third law. That's what their theory overtly says, damn it. And did you respond to any of that? No. God. So anyway, he plays a little clip out of the video, but again, he doesn't know what this weight argument is. It's a lever. I'll diagram it one more time, and I'll do it with a gear also, but it's the same argument. And it proves the theory can't be true. The theory is based on a misinterpretation of gravity. They think gravity is about how much distance you travel in the gravity. They don't understand that gravity is about how much time you're in the gravity. It's the amount of time you're in the gravity that decides how much gravity will affect you. That if I hold a pen up, I'm actually resisting gravity. I am doing work. Their theory says I'm not doing work. I could hold 10 pounds in the air steady, and they'll say I'm not doing any work because I'm not moving it. When of course I'm doing work. God. Sorry, I'll just take a little, it's just so profoundly disappointing that he would respond with this mush when he opposes so much of conventional physics and argues against their simplistic, dubious answers to circumstance, and he'll sit there and drop a pebble in water and say, "Look, this is what it actually physically does. How do you explain that?" And he didn't pay any attention to what I stated as what it physically does. Look at a lever and see what it physically does. And you'll see that it's impossible that it can create energy. It can't make more energy. It can't make free energy. It can't do that. Alright, so I shall paraphrase this video. So he makes two videos, part one, part two. The first part, he apparently makes some mathematical perceptual error in his head or something in terms of how he's manipulating these numbers, and he says, yes, DraftScience must be right. It's energy is MV. All right. No context to the actual facts that this all started with a guy saying it's MV squared 300 years ago, and in 300 years they produced no physical evidence defending that theory. But anyway, and then in the second video, he retracts all that, says, oh, I figured out my mathematical error. No, it's solid math. It's solid. It's a solid derivation. And then even goes so far as to use the word conspiracy. So bent space is a conspiracy theory. Everything that they've gotten wrong is a conspiracy theory. No, they can just make mistakes because they aren't very careful, and they don't go through with the facts, and they don't recognize that it creates paradoxes, and they just kind of ignore that. The twin paradox, for example. Lots of examples of paradoxes they just ignore. Who cares? So what? Who cares? I don't care. Paradox. Anyway, just pause again. All right. So anyway, he makes the video, says I'm right, then he says I'm wrong. So he shouldn't do that in the first place. Just redo the video. Forget it. Take the videos down. Redo it the right way. So anyway, his whole argument is the math is right. There's no addressing of a single mechanical physical argument. Then he shows my experiment in the second video and says, oh yeah, well the experiment shows 3/4. No, that's even more free energy. First off, it doesn't show that. That's not the results I saw or I measured. So not quite right there either. So anyway, and he says a couple, oh yeah, it's good you do experiments. Well, that's really not the point. I want to argue the theory. I don't really want to do experiments, frankly. Okay, I mean, why should I have to do any experiments, frankly? Shouldn't they in 300 years, if they're going to say it takes 4 times more fuel to go twice as fast, shouldn't they in 300 years produce a shred of evidence demonstrating that? Is it that hard to demonstrate how much gasoline a car consumes going twice as fast? They can't do that experiment in 300 freaking years? Oh, shit. But again, I'm just going to, all right, I'll play his second video. Sorry. This was really disappointing. I mean, I've been disappointed a lot in my life, but this was really disappointing. This response was so unresponsive. I haven't spent 2 years arguing this over trivial math errors. That's not what this is about. Oh, fuck. All right, so this is the second video. So wait, I'm just gonna ask you, Franklin. All right. Our conversation with each other will end, and I'll just say, fuck it, you're too stupid, if you don't answer this point. I'm going to illustrate the lever argument, and you either say you get it and you understand it, and you're going to explain to me why I'm wrong, or you're going to concede, okay, that there's no way this free energy machine would work, and there's no way the theory can be right, because I can't have a free energy machine. And the theory says I can by just putting a board on a rock. That's what their theory overtly says. That's the direct implication of this nonsense. And I'll also explain to you very quickly where the mathematical error is. Alright, but I'll play this little clip first. I didn't watch the end of this video, but this is where he just goes on a little... Well, it must be true. I guess it's true. Yep, it's true.
Air skate thingies, and not have to deal with trying to make stuff up on your own. But once again, I think that's pretty cool what he's doing there.
Yeah, I think it's pretty pathetic that I have to do these simple experiments, that I have to actually see if you can throw an 8-pound ball twice as fast as you can throw a 16-pound ball. I have to prove this stuff. Shouldn't this already be well established fact? I shouldn't have to prove this. Should I have to really prove that if I drop an object, a half-mass object, from 4 times higher, that it doesn't really land with 4 times the energy? How high I take it doesn't have much to do with how gravity actually works. It's just about how long something's in the gravity. And the fact is, from 4 times higher, it only takes twice as long for it to hit the ground. That's the fact. It only takes twice as long for it to hit the ground. That means it was only in the gravity twice as long. That means it only collected from the gravity twice the force. That means it can only be twice.
But I think I would have to conclude, though, in total, that the mainstream formula of energy equals 1/2 mv squared, it does seem to work.
It just doesn't seem to work. It won't work in a spaceship. So you throw the bullet out one side of your spaceship. 2,000 joules are going out one side of your spaceship. The gun barrel is going out the other side. It only has 2 joules of energy. 2 joules versus 2,000 joules of energy. And yet your spaceship goes dead straight. Can you explain that? How can it be possible that I have 2,000 joules going one way and only 2 joules going the other way, and yet somehow the spaceship keeps going straight?
Based on the initial calculations I did.
All right, and again, I have absolute contempt for this contrived, silly math. So again, here, I'll do it for you. Okay, so they say, well, it's 9.8 meters per second per second. So somehow if it's something per second, like if I comb my hair numerous times, or I do anything numerous times, that I now have a justification for squaring something. So per second, if I want to write something that happens, yes, it happens this much every time you do it. So like, whether it's a time equation or whether it's just a number equation of how many times you repeat the process, that somehow the process squared tells me how many times I did it or how many seconds I was in the gravity. So they write per second as seconds squared, when that notation is irrelevant and irrational. It's not seconds squared. It's seconds times 1 second, or it's seconds times 2 seconds, or it's seconds times 4 seconds, or 10 seconds, or 15 seconds. It's not seconds squared. So that's where the formula dies, because it thinks, okay, that the thing you're doing, whatever the event is, let's just turn the camera on. So disappointing. All right, so whatever the thing is that I'm doing, okay, the 9.8, the whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is, and I'm saying that I can do it numerous times over a period of time. And so I'm just going to say, well, then I'm just going to multiply it times the number of seconds, okay, the number of times it happens. So seconds could be times it happens or the amount of time. But I'm just going to do that multiplication. And you're saying that equals t squared. No, I mean that equals x squared. Because essentially we know velocity, mass times velocity, we're not changing the mass in any of these circumstances. So F equals essentially the change in the velocity. So you want to know the change in the force, you just find out the change in the velocity. What the hell? Yeah, that's not right. Okay. So that's what there's the derivative mistake. So if I want to say something happens per second, and it can have numerous seconds that it can happen, that I write that as the event squared. No, I don't. I don't square the event. I don't square the velocity because it happens 1 second, or it happens 10 seconds, or it happens 15 seconds, and then I multiply it times the time. Right? So that's how ludicrous it is. They say this covers the per second thing, and then they multiply it times the time again. Because they say, yeah, it has to be, well, how many seconds was it? So they already squared it, and then they multiply it by how many seconds you did it. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't make any sense at all. And that's where the math goes completely sideways. All right. So let's just finish his video, because I didn't play this last part, so we might as well both experience the horror together. Ugh. It's horrible.
You know, if you account for momentum being a vector and they cancel, then it's like, yeah, they...
Okay, yeah. Why? So that's one of the arguments I've made. Why is one a scalar and one a vector? A train is going down a track. They're saying the kinetic energy doesn't have a direction. What do you mean it doesn't have a direction? It's completely directional. It doesn't have any frickin' kinetic energy in the opposite direction. It doesn't have any up. It doesn't have any sideways. This is just bullshit and arbitrary vector scalar. Did you research why they declared these vector scalar bullshit? Is there some evidence that one's a vector and one's a scalar? Is there anything to defend it except contrivance? For fuck's sake, it doesn't mean anything. We're talking about the energy. The energy clearly is always directional. Always directional. I have a sealed container, pressurized. Clearly the energy is in all the directions. It's bouncing off all the surfaces. If I make a hole in one place, then the energy is escaping. It's only escaping in one direction. The energy going up isn't escaping out the hole. Eventually will, but it's not at the time I open the hole.
Equals, so I'm not quite sure why no one else pointed that out to you.
Oh, God. Facepalm. Yeah, trolls and morons who ignore every argument I've made have pointed it out to me, and it's absolute horseshit. So fuck you. I mean, I can't even... I wish I could be... I mean, I really want to say in this video, okay, let's just pretend this didn't happen. You know, this isn't a huge disrespect. I don't need this preaching of this contrived mathematics for 2 fucking years. I've been on science forums. These are the bullshit answers you get. So you ask a simple question. How is it possible that levers can be in our rational universe, okay, making free energy? That's what your formula overtly says. Where's your evidence? It takes 4 times more fuel to go twice as fast. Where is you have a shred of evidence that that's fucking true in the real universe? Where? Do you have a single piece of evidence ever demonstrating that to be true? Why are wrecking balls big giant wrecking balls when you could knock down so many more buildings with little tiny wrecking balls going really fast? Same energy.
But that seemed to be fairly clear, and that even from a perspective of doing it a completely different way, which is to try and...
A completely different way with the same work equations, the same fucking idiotic formula that force equals distance. No, it doesn't equal distance. It equals the amount of time the force is being applied. If you want to know how much work something's doing, you count how long, for how many intervals of time it's applying the force. Okay, you don't sit there and measure the distance. There's no distance unless you're trying to ascertain velocity. Distance is only relevant in terms of, yes, if I take a standard hunk of distance. Well, if I measure the absolute distance, everything travels forever, technically, if there's no friction. So how does it make any sense? Total distance. Well, total distance is forever if I take away friction. It's just it's silly word games. And you're sitting there preaching them to me. Defending absolute crap. And again, in the video you ignored, frankly, these arguments were made. Terrible history, okay? No evidence, no physical evidence at all. That's why I have to do experiments, because they have no physical evidence. I can't show a video because there is no physical evidence of kinetic energy being real.
See whether the amount of energy input to an object being accelerated to a certain velocity is in fact equal to the kinetic energy.
The whole game of talking even about acceleration in the context of, say, a Newton's cradle, where obviously it doesn't have anything to do with it, okay? Acceleration has nothing to do with it. It's velocity and mass in, it's velocity and mass out.
That seems to work out as well. So, and I'm kind of glad it worked out because, you know, I was thinking that, yeah, this is totally settled science, and some of my
Oh, I mean, it's just so irritating. It's totally ignored and bullshit and propaganda science. When you have no physical evidence for something, it's not settled science. You have no physical evidence you can show me. No spaceship, okay, being turned because the bullet has 2,000 joules. No evidence of that. No evidence that NASA uses anything else but Newton's equations, okay, mass momentum equations, to decide trajectories of spacecraft, to land on the moon. The fact is, they do use momentum. Thrust is momentum. They just take the mass of the stuff they have and the velocity, they throw it out of the ship, and that is the calculation for how much they're going to move the spaceship. Those are the facts. The fact is, you have zero evidence, and here you are telling me it's settled science. It's disgusting. And I can show you the paradoxes. I can show you the free energy machine. And I'm going to do that, and I want a counter argument to that argument. And if you can't make that counter argument, we're done talking.
Theories like, how do they derive mc squared are actually dependent on that being equivalent to the kinetic energy formula, 1/2 mv squared. And that's why they're the same.
No, they're not the same. Again, you just ignored the whole frickin'. The point is there's an obvious history. It was arbitrary to make up mv squared. Leibniz didn't like the atheist science, okay? He didn't like the universe being too clearly mechanical. And so he invented mv squared as a protest against a universe that seemed too ordered and perfectly mechanical. Okay? He didn't like Descartes. Period. Then there's nothing else fancy about it. And he proposed something providing zero evidence of it. Okay, the evidence was this silly gravity argument that because it's about how far you travel in gravity, not about how much time you spend in the gravity. When of course it's how much time you spend in the gravity. I've drawn that on the board. Do I have to do it again? If the Earth is here and you're flying past it, the faster you fly through the Earth's gravity, the less you get bent. I mean, the argument is so obvious and simple that it's about how if I go really slow, I'll crash into the Earth. If I go really fast, I'll barely be bent. Because it's about how long you're in the gravity, not how far you travel through the gravity.
And if there wasn't, then, well, that would really kind of mess up that whole explanation. So I'm glad that it still seems to be 1/2 mv squared.
Yeah, it doesn't seem, there's no evidence, there's absolutely no credible argument that can be made in defense of it except to contrive mathematics.
But, I'd still like to see an experiment where they actually physically measure the...
And why doesn't it exist? Is this too hard of an experiment for them to do, to prove that it takes 4 times more gasoline to go 60 miles an hour than it takes to go 30 miles an hour? That's a hard experiment to do. They haven't done it for 300 years. They haven't shown us one example of this being true. Shit, come on. That doesn't scream incredible? That in all this time, nobody's been able to document the 4 times more fuel theory.
The energy of an impact and show me that it is 1/2 mv squared and not anything else. But, it's not, it should be fairly easy to show the difference between mv, which is just momentum, versus mv squared.
Right, so you have no evidence and you just said settled science, and I'm glad it's proven, and I'm glad it seems like it's perfectly correct. And you're conceding there's no evidence. Shit.
So that's all I have for this video, and till next time, ta-ta.
Okay, so anyway, just profoundly disappointing. So I'm just going to make this lever gear argument one more time and just say, come on. How can you possibly make this fit in the physical universe? We do know, some facts about reality, and it just can't be possible. It's not possible that this theory is correct. This was an argument made 300 years ago, ignored 300 years ago, is still being ignored, just ignored. Leibniz's very argument was essentially, it was decisively one-sided. If he basically said there's no conservation of energy if you believe in momentum. If kinetic energy is true, then momentum is false. That is the argument. And it's clear the evidence says momentum is true. That's the thing conserved. And kinetic energy is false. It's made up. It's baby talk. The gun doesn't have 1,000 times less energy in it than the bullet. Newton's third law is valid in the sense that I wouldn't write it the way he wrote it, but the fact is the gun is doing an equal thing to what the bullet is doing. They have the same energy in them. Alright, so we're going to do the lever argument and the gear argument, and then I'll just, I don't know what I'll do. It's just no point, right? This is such a defeat in the sense that there's no point in being intelligent on this planet because, you know, people won't even play a little bit fair. I mean, again, he's showing clips from videos of mine. How could he possibly have ignored all the arguments I've made? Every single argument was ignored. So he could just throw a silly mathematical derivation in my face for the 15th millionth time. You know, a silly one. Per second means second squared. No, it doesn't mean the second squared. It means I did it once, or I did it 7 times, or I did it 10 times. It doesn't mean square. Anyway. Alright, so simple device. Lever. Okay. I put a 2-mass object here. I put a half-mass object here. 1 here, a 2 here. Okay, it perfectly balanced. It's a scale. The scale says this equals this, because this will move twice the distance that this will move with any agitation. So any energy I put in here, okay, this object will go down and it'll come back up, and it'll go down and it'll come back up, and it'll come back up and down with equal amounts of energy. On this side of the lever, their theory says, okay, for any energy I put in here, I have twice as much energy moving here. Okay, this will move this side of the lever, this object on the lever will now move with twice the energy. It'll go up with twice the energy. It'll go down with twice the energy. Twice the energy on this side that you have on this side. Even though I have put 100 joules in here, I've dropped it with 100 joules of energy. That is, I lifted it against gravity with 100 joules of energy. I dropped the 2 mass at this location on the lever, and I, in fact, by their theory, produce 200 joules of energy here. Okay, it's a fact. That's what their theory says is happening. Now, you clearly know it isn't happening. It's a balance, okay? Whatever's on this side is on this side, because when this goes down, okay, this one goes up. That's the pushing force. This one going down is the pushing force to raise this one up. It can't possibly have 200 joules here and only produce 100 joules of energy up. Because when this goes down, the energy of it going down has to produce the energy that lifts this up. Okay, and there's no frickin' way that 100 joules going down can produce 200 joules going up. Not possible. So please, just diagram how a lever works. When I put a 2 mass here and the 1 location, I put the 1 mass here at the 2 location, twice the distance on the lever. Okay, does the lever just equally convert? Does it just say this 1 mass moving twice the distance equals a 2 mass moving 1/2 the distance, right? The amount of fluctuation on this side will be 1/2 the amount of fluctuation at this longer length. That's the difference. And if you just say, okay, it's half the distance, and it's, you know, that means twice the distance and it's half the mass, that's going to equal twice the mass and half the distance. Those two things are equal. The kinetic energy formula says they're not. It says there's 200 joules of work, 200 joules worth of energy, 200 watts of heat, 200, it's more. I put 100 watts of heat in, I get 200 watts of heat out. It's thermodynamically impossible. It's non-conservative. It breaks every one of Newton's laws. It breaks frickin' logic. It's frickin' preposterous that this theory could be true, and a lever proves it. And a lever proved it 300 years ago, and there was no conspiracy. People just said, oh, that's too complicated. I don't want to pay any attention to that argument. I want to believe in my magical squaring. I love squaring. Squaring is so much fun. Square, 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 square. Let's put squares every fucking where. No, it's bullshit. Alright, so I'll do the gear argument down here in whatever space I have left. A simple gear proves it, okay? So I have a gear fixed to another gear with little notches on it. Alright, little notches. So I put a 2 mass on this gear here, and I put a 1 mass here. 1, 2. Right. If I gave you the gear and I just put the two mass close to the fulcrum, close to the center there. All right. This is twice the distance, by the way. All right. And I told you to turn it, and it was inside a box, and you couldn't see. You couldn't tell if I put the one mass here or I put the two mass here. The two things would feel exactly the same. It would take just as much energy to move one from here to there as it would take to move the other one from here to there, right, to the peak point. You couldn't tell the difference. You couldn't for $1 billion. Like, I have $1 billion prize for you to be able to tell the difference between when I have the two mass here and I have the one mass out here. And you couldn't do it. You couldn't win the money. All right, because you're putting the same exact energy in, because it's the same argument here. It's the same argument as a scale. It balances. It's the same. You can't tell the difference. It's physically the same. Okay, because this is going to be twice the distance as this is going to be. You're going to move 2 pounds, half the distance. You're going to move the 1 pound, and it's going to be the same amount of energy. And if I launched these things, if I made them so they can fly off, and so the lever, there's a little stop here, so it stops it. You turn it. Okay, with the same force for each one, you apply the same force for each one, and you let them fly off the gear. Okay, your preposterous, proven, settled science says this has twice the amount of joules of energy. So if I just put the object on the further away lever, I can make twice the energy. I can make free energy. I can put 100 joules in, I can get 100 joules out here, I can get 200 joules out here. I put another gear out here. I can make 400 joules out here. I put another gear out here. I can make 7,000 joules out here. I can do the bullet and the gun thing all over again. I can create a preposterously silly, exaggerated statement about how much energy it has. It can't possibly have that energy because I can't make free energy this easy. Free energy machines aren't this fucking simple. Now, ignore this argument and we're done, okay? Explain to me where I made a single fucking mistake in that diagramming of a gear and my diagram of a lever. Explain the fucking mistake, okay? Or shove your goddamn settled science bullshit up your ass, okay? Because you're just another shit talker, another asshole who ignores the fucking argument. Another asshole who's just gonna preach bullshit. All right, I mean, this isn't a complex argument. Again, I didn't spend 2 fucking years because of a stupid mathematical derivation, for fuck's sake. I haven't done this for 10 years because I'm wrong. I've done it for 10 years because I'm goddamn right, and you people can't provide a single fucking shred of physical evidence, okay, that disputes a single fucking thing I've been saying. And instead you make arguments like this. How can we have a fucking goddamn debate when you ignore every fucking argument? This starts with the goddamn history. It starts with clay experiments and absolute bullshit sand experiments. Okay, it starts with their complete misunderstanding of gravity. Do I have to draw it again? Planet. You're flying past the planet. What makes the difference? How much distance you're traveling by the planet or how fast you travel through the gravity? Yeah, the time matters. Okay, it's the time that matters. How much time are you exposed to a force? That matters. How much distance you're traveling doesn't matter. Okay. This is a lot more angry than I wanted it to be, but I can't. There's no other way to interpret it as a huge giant fuck you when somebody shows your damn video and says, well, I don't know what that shit over there was about some sort of weights. It's the counter argument. It's the argument I want you to counter. I didn't ask you to do a mathematical fucking derivation. The same fucking standard bullshit derivation based on the same standard fucking misunderstanding of how gravity works. That's not what I'm debating. I'm debating the history, I'm debating the physical evidence, and I'm debating the theoretical viability of the moronic theory. It can't theoretically be true because it creates free fucking energy. Till next time. Just so. I like Franklin. There's just no doubt about it. I still like him. But this is just so disappointing. It's so far from a counter argument to anything I've been saying for 2 years. Anyway, to the video he showed, it's just an insult to that video to say that video was about a mathematical derivation. No, it was about the absence of any good reasoning, any good logic, or any good evidence to believe in mv squared. There's nothing good. There's nothing good in the history, there's nothing good in the evidence, and there's nothing good in the logic. It breaks Newton's laws, it doesn't make any sense, it's completely contradictory. That was what was in that video, and you responded with complete evasion. Okay, that's enough. This has been DraftPhysics.com. Debate physics also, but if this is the level of the debate, forget it. I make an argument, they ignore it. Fuck that.